We'd really love to have the option to purchase our building within the next 3 to 5 years so that we can control our space for forever. I really do think that should be a primary goal for pretty much every operator out there. It's way more sticky and way, way more powerful for a member to bring in a new customer to try out the sport than it is for someone to see a print ad, a social media ad. A lot of my goal with our marketing channels is to help our customers feel like they are not just having a transactional experience, but they're actually having a relational experience. Looking back at it, it's like, well, was I actually working on my business or was I just working in my business?
Welcome to the Climbing Gym Growth Podcast, where we share stories and strategies from climbing gym owners and operators to help you grow your community and business. Today, I'm joined by Andrew Hou from Uplift Climbing in Shoreline, Washington. Thanks for joining, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. First time caller, long time listener.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great. I love to hear that there's listeners out there. Exciting to hear. So what is your backstory with climbing? How did you find climbing, get into it, and how did that lead you into starting your own gym?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the medium length version story of it is, so I was born in the States, but my parents are from Singapore, Malaysia. So most of my life was actually spent growing up overseas in Southeast Asia. When we moved back to moved back to the States, I was 14 and we were trying to figure out what the most American thing that we could do as a family was. So I joined the Boy Scouts. And through the Boy Scouts, I found hiking and backpacking and outdoor rec. And then one day, these adults showed up with all this really cool climbing equipment and ice axes and crampons. And I thought, that looks like a lot of fun. I really want to be a part of that. So I joined the Olympia Mountaineers, got into mountaineering, climbed a lot of volcanoes, and then realized that going up and down really, really big hills can be fun, but maybe not so much fun for me. So I started climbing shorter and shorter and shorter things, started sport climbing a lot more. Now I boulder a lot. And then when I found the sport, like a lot of people do, you get into climbing and you think, man, this is the best thing ever. This is all I want to do for my entire life. And I figured, well, how cool would it be if I opened a climbing gym? And I was working at a climbing gym at that time in high school and through college. And you learn pretty quickly that there's actually very little rock climbing that goes into running a climbing gym. So instead of choosing to run on just pure stoke, I really tried to buckle down and do my homework, made a plan, sat down, graduated through college, and actually spent about 10 years working in the tech industry as a software engineer. So sometimes people think, oh, Andrew found climbing and then got burnt out in tech and turned his hobby into his career. But opening a climbing gym was always actually plan A. So I wanted to do that
Nice.
ever since I was in college, and then made a lot of steps in my tech career to sort of plan and ready
Wow.
myself to make this eventual transition. Because when you're a child at 21 years old, you have no idea what you're doing. And then
Yeah.
by the time I was 30, I was like, okay, now I think I'm ready. And then we're actually going to do it.
Well, it's incredible that you had the patience to build the skills necessary and kind of the forethought to do that. That's awesome. What kind of skills do you feel like transferred over from the tech industry into opening a climbing gym?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with personal maturity and resilience, honestly.
Yeah.
Because when you're working in the tech industry, things change constantly. Like you'll join a company and then the company will be entirely different in 2 years for ways that are kind of hard for you to understand all the time. But when you start a climbing gym, there are things that aren't that different in that same regards, where planning a climbing gym is different than building a climbing gym, which is different than running a climbing gym. And you're always kind of in a point of transition as a small business owner as well. So I think those parallels are quite similar. I'm not writing software anymore, but the same sort of project management skills are still there. One thing that I did learn in the tech industry is that the technical coding problems are actually not the hard problems at all. The real hard problems are the people problems and the relationships and getting everybody on the same page to come up with some deliverable. And that's the same thing that I experience in climbing now as well. It's getting everyone on the same page. It's getting everyone on mission. It's getting everybody behind a singular idea or product.
Yeah, that's huge. The adaptability and flexibility in the leadership. So it sounds like you were pretty well set up there. So you decided to open a gym. What was that process like?
Long and complicated, um, as it is for most people that are trying to open climbing gyms. A little plug is I did write about this on a Substack that's listed on Uplift Climbing's website. But from the time when I said, okay, now I'm actually going to give a really good go at it, until the time that I signed the lease was probably 2.5 years,
Mm.
um, where I
Yeah.
really, really tried to dig in and do my homework and interview other owners and operators and make sure that I knew what I was getting into before I signed any documents. Because the last thing that I wanted to do was just jump in and have no idea what I was doing, because I already knew that I wasn't going to know what I was doing by any stretch of the imagination. But I wanted to prepare enough so that I could at least know what questions to ask. So I was lucky enough to have a couple friends that are gym operators, but also other friends that come from the entrepreneur background, either in software or outside of software, that I could really pick their brain and say, hey, what does it look like to run a commercial construction project? What does it look like to create something out of nothing? What does it look like to court investors and all of those kinds of things? A lot of it started out with a really long exercise of building out a business plan that was 30 pages long, that asked basically every question that I knew and didn't know to ask. And then I would shop it around and talk to some friends and confidants, and they would ask me a question, and I'd say, hey, I didn't think of that before. And then add that to the business plan and add another question, add another question. By the time I was finally ready to start looking for physical spaces, that was also a really long journey, because Seattle, like most cities, commercial real estate is just a challenging market. It's really hard to find exactly what you need, exactly what you want in the exact neighborhood that you want, given the unique needs that any climbing gym has, where buildings have to not just be tall enough, but they also have to be wide enough, and they also have to have the appropriate utilities and walkability and all those types of things. So I did finally land on a space in Shoreline, which is the adjacent city of Seattle. So I could throw a rock over the city border into Seattle from our parking lot. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's pretty close. um, and then we ended up signing the lease in March of 2020, which was a beautiful time to sign a lease. And the world flipped upside down a couple times after that.
Yeah.
And we ended up opening in February of 2021. And I'm proud to say that we're still here.
That sounds like a tough time to open. Oh, how did you handle that time when COVID hit and you're trying to gear up to open? How was that experience for you?
Yeah, it's hard and hard to describe because I don't really know anything different, right? It was just really
Right.
chaotic, but I had never done this before. So I can't necessarily say that I knew it was going to go better or that I thought things were going worse at the time. And we also have to remember that was just a time of incredible unknown for everybody, right? So we can look back at it now and say, man, that was a years long, drawn out process. And in many ways, Uplift and myself personally, we're still really feeling the effects of that now, even though the pandemic was started over 5 years ago. But there's been a lot of trickle down economic effects that still affect us today.
So, what are those things that you're still feeling? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So when we first started, we thought that COVID would be done by Easter. Then we thought it'd all be done by July 4th. And then we all thought it'd be done by Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then it just kept
Yeah.
on dragging on, right? So because of that, it was always just kind of hard to plan. It's hard to really know what the future is and really set us up for success. And that's what's kind of kept us on the back foot since we first started. And not to say that we haven't made a lot of efforts and strides to move forward, um, but just in an extraordinarily unpredictable time, like a historically unpredictable time, right? It was just kind of impossible to say, okay, this is what we're going to do and move forward. So, small examples of that is when we finally opened in February 2021, we opened under 25% capacity restrictions from the county, sorry, from the state on a reservation only based system,
Yeah.
which means no grand opening, means
Yeah.
no big party, um, no streamers and live music or big comp or anything like that. It means that there were no farmers markets and neighborhood events that we could go um, do in-person marketing at. It also meant that because we were a new business, when there were the original, when there was the stimulus money that was flowing through PPP loans and EIDL, so the economic impact disaster loans, all those different programs, we didn't qualify for any of those because those all required 2019 receipts in order to qualify.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah, so we yeah, we just straight up didn't
Brutal.
qualify for any
Oh
COVID
no.
stimulus. Yeah, so that was really brutal. And interest rates and
Yeah.
cost of operations, all of those have just really shot up as well. So not to paint a hugely bleak picture, um, but I often question like, did we start too early or did we start too late? And it doesn't really matter, I suppose, but it does seem that we really threaded the needle on a uniquely bad time to do this.
Wow, yeah, that sounds tough. So from a funding standpoint, so are you the sole owner? Do you have other investors? How
Yeah,
did that all play out?
yeah. So I own 81% of the business, and I do have other investors. The other investors are all small friends and family type investors, 1% here, 3% there, that kind of person. So when I was first courting people in order to open the business, there's a couple different ways that you can go after money, right? Because when I was in the tech world, you can really see how people go after millions and millions of dollars for
Yeah.
whatever. But people are going at the type of people that are investing after that are looking for a very specific return on investment. They have
Yes.
really strong metrics on how they want their money to perform for them.
Yeah.
Um, and if you're an owner and you're courting that type of investment, you'll be really beholden to those performance metrics,
Sure.
and they will push you to do whatever it takes in order to hit those
Hmm.
metrics. That was of less interest to me. The type of business that I wanted to open, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there wasn't some selfish motivation to this, right? Like I wanted to open a kick-ass climbing facility that was designed for climbers like me that hit a niche in the market that I didn't think was really being filled by the Seattle climbing gym market at the time. So all of those things remain true. And also, it was as important for me to build a facility that was really about serving the neighborhood and serving the community and using the sport of climbing as a vehicle to do all the beautiful things that we know sport can do, right?
Yeah.
In the way that it brings people together, in the way that it helps us push past fears and boundaries, in the ways that it helps us accomplish things that we didn't think that we were able to accomplish, in the way that it's intergenerational, where a middle school kid will talk to an adult and share beta project on the moon board together. That's just not a thing that happens in many other sports. So because of that, when I was recruiting investment, I was painting a community-based picture and a service neighborhood-based picture where I was telling people, hey, this is the vision for the type of neighborhood and community that I want to live in. And do you want to be a part of that? And if you want to be a part of that, let's actually make this happen.
And so you feel like they don't have the same type of oversight that a tech company would have in that they're not looking at your books and questioning everything that you're doing. They're a little bit more lenient with you.
Let's say that they're more lenient financially for sure, and also
Y-
just much more bought into a vision, right? It's much
Yeah.
more about what is our holistic goal as a company and as a community rather than what is just the self-interested financial goal, because that does exist and that doesn't go away because,
Right.
I want to be able to make a living doing this. But more importantly for us, or as importantly, I guess, is the question of, are we running a business that we can be proud of? Is it a business that I would want to bring my friends to, that I'd want to bring my
Yeah.
family to?
And I like the aspect about how you're trying to improve or add to the community that you're in as
Mhm.
well. I think that not only do you have like bring people into the sport, into your gym, and they're part of your community, but you're also impacting the greater community. So let's get some more context about the gym. So
Mhm.
you've been open for 4 years and change, it sounds like.
Coming up on 5, yeah.
What almost 5 years? Wow. So what types of climbing do you offer? How big is the facility?
Yeah, so the specs of the facility. Yeah,
Exactly.
we've been
Yeah.
open for almost 5 years. We are a bouldering only facility.
Hmm.
The building itself is roughly 6,800 square feet with about 1,000 square feet of mezzanine space. It's 16 feet deck to deck, from floor deck to ceiling deck. So
Hmm.
add a foot of padding and then subtract a foot
Yep.
of space for mechanical systems, which means that our walls are 14 feet tall from bottom to peak.
Okay.
Um, we aren't a large bouldering facility. So our total wall square footage is roughly 2,200 square feet of climbing
Okay.
wall is all. I have this whole soapbox though about how I think a lot of facilities will list the square footage of climbing area, but I think that number lies a lot. Because
Yeah.
that number doesn't really describe what is activatable or usable simultaneously
Right.
climbing space. So the number that I think is a lot more accurate is linear wall feet of climbing space.
I agree with
So
that. Yeah.
yeah, so we have about 120 linear wall feet of climbing
Okay.
space. Fitness area, adjustable board, fixed moon board, mezzanine space for working out and playing ping pong and sitting on your laptop, all
Nice.
that kind of stuff.
Cool. And your adjustable board is that like a kilter board or tension board or
We
something
have
like
a
that?
TP2 on it.
Nice.
Hmm.
Cool. Okay, great. So you were talking about sort of the Seattle area. I'm curious how, from your perspective, how has the competitive landscape changed over the years you've been open?
That's a really good question. And then I'm going to caveat this entire thing that this is just my perspective and opinion because every operator in the Seattle area is going to have a slightly different perspective. Um,
Totally.
it is a really unique market. We are home to Vertical World, which is America's first commercial climbing gym that opened in
Yeah.
1987, right? Um, within the Seattle city limits. So this is excluding the east side, which is just across the bridge on the other side of the lake and very close by as well. Just within the Seattle city limits, there's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight climbing gyms, I want to say, and then us that is outside of the Seattle city limits. So there's a lot of us, a lot of which have opened within the last 5 years. I want to
Mm.
say over half of us opened within the last 5 years. So I think the market's still shifting a lot. I think that there is this strong belief that if you build it, they will come, and that you could build as many climbing gyms as you wanted, and the market would still be there for it. And I don't know that the jury's back in on how true that is. I think things are a little different now, where climbing looks different now than it did pre-COVID and during the height of COVID, where I think the customer usage patterns have changed a little bit. But at the same time, I also don't think we're saturated. I think that we have a lot of opportunity and a lot of work to do as an industry to kind of self-define what climbing is. I think part of what's happened is that all these different climbing gyms that have all popped up, we haven't necessarily been super intentional of defining what our sport is for the non-climber. So if I am a quote unquote core climber, and I don't really like that term, but I don't have a better one. But if I'm a core climber, I have an expectation of what a climbing facility is when I walk into
Right.
it. But if I am a brand new climber, or maybe the most outdoorsy thing that I've ever done is take a walk in the park,
Mm.
I don't really know what I'm getting myself into. So I might walk into an uplift and think to myself, oh, this is what climbing is. All climbing is like this. But if you walk into vertical world, you're going to have a uniquely different experience there. And if you walk into an Edgeworks, you're going to have a uniquely different experience there as well. So I think as we start to clarify a little bit more of what those unique experiences and products are, I think we start to get a very different competitive landscape that has the opportunity to be more collaborative and less trying
Mm.
to box each other out and more about saying, hey, like if you want to eat, the 8 ounce gourmet hamburger, you go to this place. And if you really crave a Big Mac, you go to that place. And if you want a smash burger, you go to that place. And
Yeah.
there's room for all of us.
This is a great topic. So, yeah, so it's kind of just differentiation. So it sounds like you're saying that the climbing gyms are already differentiated.
Mhm.
Is the issue around just the way that it's being communicated to people, or do you find that that the gyms need to differentiate even more to carve out
Mm.
their niche?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. Not to throw stones at the other facilities because, and I can't speak for them and what's going on behind the scenes there, right? But I would say for me at Uplift, we strongly think all the time about what is Uplift, what is our product that we're offering, and how does it differ from other products that aren't necessarily being offered in the area. So, for example, one of the things that we talk about at Uplift is that we really want to strip away everything that isn't a climbing gym and offer you climbing. We want climbing to really, really be the core product of everything that happens there. An example that I would give is if you're the more prototypical, like say V4 to V6, you've been doing this for 2 to 3 years, you're really, really psyched on it. You're in the gym 3 to 4 days a week because you can't imagine doing any other activity that's as much fun. You're going to go into a facility at Uplift and then you're going to pay your membership dollars there. And you're going to be confident that 100% of your membership dues are going to go to things that are directly relevant to your membership experience. You're going to know that it's going to go to the staff. You're going to know that it's going to go to rent for a facility that you use all of it at. You know that it's going to go towards fitness equipment that will improve your cross training experience,
Mhm.
as opposed to maybe going to a different facility and thinking, oh, well, there's that whole wing over there for kids programs or summer camps or corporate events or maybe even the facility that they're building across town. And my dollars, I will never experience any of that and never receive any benefit from those places. And not to say that that's not a good business model, that's just a different business model than what we choose to do at Uplift. We've really chosen to focus on what is every person coming in through the store, what is the benefit directly to them?
So, if I'm a first time climber and I come into your facility, what does that experience feel like? And how maybe do you feel like it's different than the other gyms around you?
I think the thing that becomes difficult for us and some of the tension that we have at Uplift is like, how do we really push that core climbing experience and that core climbing mentality while also being invitational to the sport, right?
Right.
Because there's the temptation to say, oh, well, in order to be a core climber, you must be this tall to ride the ride. You
Hmm.
sort of artificially increase these barriers to the sport. And for many good reasons, a lot of other facilities have spent a lot of time trying to lower that barrier of entry into the sport in order to make more welcoming spaces. And I think that's really important to do. I think the slight difference in our take on how to do that is if you're going to the batting cages, let's say, and I don't, so I'm just pretending that I know what that's like. But if you're going to the batting cages, you're playing baseball. You're hitting that ball. If the ball is thrown at you at 40 miles per hour, or if it's thrown at you at 80 miles per hour, you're still hitting the ball with the bat. You got to take that swing every time. So that's kind of what our experience or our desire is for new climbers coming into Uplift for the first time. You might be climbing the easiest route in the world. I still want you to feel like you're actually rock climbing. You might be a little bit overwhelmed by all the colors and all the overhanging walls and all the different pieces of equipment that are within the facility. But we want our staff and we want our community to make you feel welcome enough to say, when you leave the space, oh, I actually am a rock climber and I did actually do this. Because I think there are many times where you'll hear people that have done the sport for a long time and they'll say, well, I'm not really a rock climber, right? Like I go to the gym and I kind of do this and I kind of do that, but I'm just kind of playing games and everybody else, they're the real rock climbers.
Hmm.
We want the V0, the V1, the V2 climber to leave Uplift and say, wow, I actually did this today.
Cool concept. So, how do you curate that experience? I imagine that there has to be some level of route setting involved,
Mhm.
awareness from the route setters to really craft something that feels more like
Yeah.
rock climbing.
Yeah, so a lot of that comes from our route setting, right? So Uplift is a completely overhanging gym, actually. So
Oh, wow.
our shallowest wall is 5 degrees overhanging. So we have 5, 15, 30, 45, and 60, and then the one adjustable wall,
Mhm.
the moon board. So even on the shallowest wall, they are still climbing on an overhanging wall and they're fighting gravity more than they would on a slab. So some of the ways in which we have to set on the wall, we have to be pretty invitational to say, hey, like to create an experience where they can be brand new to this and still feel like they can climb on a 30-degree wall. So whether or not that's visual cues in our route setting to say, hey, really put your foot here, or if that's, creative uses of volumes and space to say, I know this is overhanging and I know you can't do a pull up, but if you put your foot on this fat, flat hold, you know, rustic flower, you can
Mhm.
still feel like you're participating in this and you can do one move or even just hang off the wall at all. I think that's already a big win. I don't think route setting can exist in a vacuum. One thing that I really like about our space at Uplift is that our front desk sits literally inside the space of our climbing gym. So if you work the front desk, you can turn around and just see all the climbing terrain, as opposed to a lot of other facilities. You check in at the front desk, you go in around a corner, and then you never see the climbers again. Because of that, you can build real relationship with the people that are at the wall. I encourage staff to go out into the climbing bay for the person that's checked in for the first time and just ask them, hey, how's your session going? Like, do you need some recommendations? Do you need to get onto this different part of the wall? Is there anything I can tell you? Do you know how your climbing shoes work with extra friction and the rubber and all that kind of stuff?
Mhm.
So that they're not just sort of cast out into the sea of colorful shapes on their own.
Yeah. Do you train your staff to talk to people kind of explain the ethos to the climbing gym to people that come into the facility for the first time, what does that sound like?
That's a really good question. And I would say something that we are trying to make constant improvement around. I wouldn't say that it's something that we're necessarily hitting it out of the park all the time with, and there is always stuff to improve on. One of the things that I said for a long time, maybe for about a year, was that, um, man, if I could just get people into Uplift to experience it for the first time, they would get it. So it
Mhm.
wasn't a question of like, is the product good? Because I know that the product is good, but
Yeah.
I'm struggling to get people in the door to say, hey, this is climbing different than climbing that you've experienced at other places in Seattle. Because we are the
Yeah.
smallest footprint gym in Seattle, right? So if you're going to go to big gym down the street, you could spend a lot of time at big gym and you could think, oh, this is what rock climbing is. Carte blanche. There's no other kind of rock climbing. It has been challenging for us to get people into our space to experience that difference for the first time. And in many ways, too, all the things that we've talked about how Uplift differentiates itself, is really powerful, but not really the right vocabulary to use for
Mm.
people that are experiencing the sport the first time, right?
Right.
Because if you're a first time climber, I can talk to you about route setting and feelings of accomplishment and just sort of this general ethos of dim to crag transitions and all that. And they're going to say, yeah, 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 I don't care. Where's the next V0 that I can do?
Hmm.
So even the idea of training my staff to describe these things to them, we've tried that in the past, and it has worked to some extent, but also isn't really a one size fits all solution. So a lot
Yeah.
of it ends up being this desire to create a more like holistically hospitable environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what we really want people to come into the sport to do is, like I said earlier, we really view Uplift as a vehicle for our community and for our neighborhood instead. We really view climbing as a sport as a vehicle rather than the actual goal. So while yes, I do have these high aspirations for what type of climbing gym we want to be, as important is what does that climbing actually accomplish? I'm not actually interested in churning out V10 climbers. That doesn't matter to me at all.
Yeah.
I do think that as a byproduct of the way that we approach climbing, I do think that that does happen. But what
Mm.
I'm much more excited about is the mom that comes in with her 2 year old and then tops out the V3 and is so stoked that she's doing something that she never thought she could do and invites the two other moms also with toddlers and say, hey, let's all get together on a Sunday afternoon and do all of this together.
And so, has your mission, kind of vision, values changed since you've opened?
Mm,
Just
mm,
because the thought comes to mind, because
mhm.
having a fully kind of overhung terrain, I'm curious as to like when you opened the gym, was the initial thought to be more of a training facility for core climbers, and has that kind of evolved over years?
Yes, it has. That's a really good thing to point out. So yes, the original intent was in order to be much more of a training facility for core climbers, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I would say that we haven't moved away from that. I
Mhm.
would say it would be more accurate that we've added to that instead,
I see.
because part of this has to do with my own vision and own sort of growth within myself, where, yeah, I really want this training facility that has the ability to elevate climbers to next levels as outdoor athletes, but
Mhm.
then coming to understand that the real excitement that happens there isn't the V10, right? Or the V whatever. The real excitement that happens there is that growth and that increase in ability and that understanding that I'm capable of more. So how do I share that feeling with everybody? Because when you're the core climber that's going to a training facility, you're going with a real specific goal in mind, but that goal is not exclusive to just core climbers, right? Or that goal is not exclusive to people that just climb V8 and above. That goal can be for anybody.
Mhm.
An example that I really like to give is we run a bouldering league during the summer, just like a fun, people make teams, collect points, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember looking at the scorecards of the different teams that had participated. And we do that thing where you equalize people's scores based on what they determine as their red point grade. So the
Right.
V8 climber will get as many points as the V2 climber does, right? And then
Hmm.
I'm looking at the scorecard of this V10 climber, and they had tried every boulder in the gym, and they had tried everything a max of 3 times. So they had flashed or done second or third go. And then if something was a little bit harder, they just weren't into it. And
Mm.
then I look at the scorecard of this V2 climber, and she had this one V3 or V4 on her card, and she had tried it 35 times.
Wow.
Yeah, she had tried 35 times in two
That's incredible.
sessions. It was incredible. And I was like, man, this is what it's about, right?
Yeah,
This
definitely.
lady gets it. She's here pushing herself, and she didn't even top it at the very end of it, but she was
Mhm.
just so psyched to keep on giving it the effort. And that was the whole point.
Yeah, that's great. So, something I like to do is ask previous guests on the podcast questions for future guests on the podcast.
Mm.
So, my last interview was with Parker Sims, the owner of Gravity Bear, and he has a question for you. It is, looking back, what is something you wish you knew ahead of time in those first couple of months after opening that now feels like common sense or a no brainer?
I think something that really feels like common sense now, especially in those really formative opening times, is choosing how to spend your time, I guess. Um, so one thing that I wrote about a couple years ago is that when you're first building a climbing gym, you are in a position where you're asking other people all sorts of questions all the time, right? You're asking the city when your permit's done. You're asking your general contractor, why is this sub behind? You're asking your architect, hey, can we move this to there? And that's all well and fun and good. And you do that for about a year and you get well practiced in it. And then you get your certificate of occupancy, and then you open, and all of a sudden, the whole thing flips. All of a sudden,
Mm.
everybody's asking you questions instead. They're saying, where is the cleaning towels? Where do I put the rental shoes? How do I sign up for a day pass? Do I need a reservation? Why does my kid not have a waiver on file? And you don't really recognize that transition very much because we're in it. We're in the muck and we're saying, oh, this
Mhm.
is just the next step. But instead, what you really have to recognize is that I haven't just taken the next step, I've taken on an entirely new job. My job role has changed from building a climbing gym to running a climbing gym. And when you're getting into that running the climbing gym phase, it's so tempting to go in and do everything yourself. And it's so tempting to go in there and to just work in the business constantly. I remember showing up at Uplift and saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing right now, so I think I should go clean the bathrooms. And not that I'm above cleaning the bathrooms, and I still clean the bathrooms occasionally now. I think that's an important thing for owners to still be on the ground floor and experience everything. But looking back at it, it's like, well, was I actually working on my business or was I just working in my business at the time? Was I just working with the idea that I'm an employee and if there were 10 Andrews, we could just run this place great? Or was I actually working on the business from a holistic view and saying, oh, I'm actually trying to improve this whole machine right now. I'm trying to move this and steer this ship in a direction. So looking back, I want to be gracious to myself because I do think that's a really natural transition for everybody to go through. So I don't know that I was necessarily doing anything wrong at the time, but I think it's important to recognize that transition and really focus on working on the business instead of in the business.
That's a great answer. I want to talk about membership and revenue a little
Hmm.
bit here. If you don't mind me asking, how many active members do you have now? And are you where you thought you would be this far along?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable saying exactly how many
Okay.
members we have at this time. I will say that we are not as far along as I thought we would be. I think some of the reason that we're behind what our original membership targets were has to do with being on the back foot because of a global pandemic that no one could have predicted. So I think that's a lot of it, where it was hard for us to start out on the right foot. I think as a business. I think on top of that, I think the climbing market has also shifted over the past 5 years where customers are behaving in different ways than they were in the past. And I think some of that also has to do with so if you go to the Climbing Wall Association conference or if you read the CBJ, there's a lot of articles talking about the growth of our sport. And I do think that there is growth there. But at the same time, when you talk to the people that have been doing this for a while, pretty much everyone's saying that their check-ins are down right now. Pretty much everyone's saying that numbers are worse than they were in previous years.
Do you think that's a saturation thing? Do you feel like that there's so many
Mm,
gyms in all these markets that now everyone's getting spread a little thin?
I don't think that's necessarily a saturation thing, although depending on the market that you're in, I do believe that that contributes to it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're in Indianapolis, you've got three options there, as
Yeah.
opposed to in the greater Seattle area, you have 12 plus options, which is not technically true because a lot of them are multi-site facilities. So
Right.
realistically, you have like five options in the greater
Yeah.
Seattle area. So I think some of that comes from saturation. I think a lot of that has come from the market evolving in a way that maybe we didn't anticipate or maybe didn't prepare for as well. Um, I think a lot of that has to do with what I was saying earlier about how do we be invitational to the sport in a way that actually gets people excited, right? Because I think there's two different ways to kind of approach a lack of check-ins. It's
Yeah.
we can either say, hey, what is climbing? And really attract people with climbing, or we can say, what are all these other sports doing? What are all these activities doing? And try to turn climbing into that, right? Because I could decide to turn my activity at a climbing gym into another activity like an axe throwing bar, or, you know, go play pool and darts at the bar, or play laser tag or whirly ball or any of these other different types of activities. And again, I'm not saying that those are bad choices to make. I think those are certainly options, and I think that they can be very astute business options. I would say that the choice that I've taken is, how do I turn climbing into an attractive thing for my customers? And I think that's a longer, harder path.
Yeah. So it sounds like, if I'm hearing you, it's a conversion issue, is kind of what we're
Hmm.
experiencing. Like, as a whole, our industry can get better at creating new climbers.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
I think we as a whole as an industry, we've done an okay job with getting people in the door, but we haven't done a great job with showing them why they should stay.
Yeah. I like how you had mentioned how your staff will go up to people on their first visit and talk to them and see how they're doing, kind of check in with them.
Hmm.
What other things along those lines do you try to do to encourage people to take up the sport?
I've said this a lot, but in the same way that I really view Uplift as a vehicle, the question is, well, where are we driving to, right? So I want my members and people that come through the doors at Uplift to feel like they're going somewhere where Uplift is the vehicle, but is not fully dependent on Uplift. Like I still want
Mm,
them to have a love for a sport if they move across the city or move across the country, or if they're
yeah.
climbing outside on the weekend or something like that. They can't be dependent just on our physical location, because that I think is disingenuous to them and is does not provide real longevity within the sport. And I think that actually doesn't serve us very well either, because I think what happens in those situations is people get really excited and then for some reason they burn out or something happens and they're just like, I'm done, and they never go back
Yeah.
to climbing at all. So I think what we really try to do is we push people to climb with each other. We try and like with things like bouldering leagues and meetups, we try
Yeah.
and encourage people to make friends and form partnerships and form friendships. We all of our staff are outdoor climbers as well, which I think used to be universally the case in climbing gyms. And I think that's a lot less the case in climbing gyms these days, where nowadays we have a lot of staff that either don't climb outside at all or are just not that stoked on climbing outside and only do it once or twice a year. So it's pretty common for members to be climbing outside to run into one of our staff members and say, "Oh, hey, what's the beta on this boulder? How do I get to that one? What's the clipping stance for so and so?" So I think that really creates the sense of ownership within the sport for themselves. And I think that ownership is what drives them to invite their friends, bring other people, create that passion for it. So that sort of lifts all of us up.
Cool. So, continuing with the theme of bringing people into the gym, bringing people into the sport, how have your marketing methods changed over the years?
Yeah, that's hard. And I would say upfront that I'm not very good at it. I would say that that's something that I am trying to increase on and grow on all the time.
I think
One of
that's
the
really
things,
common among gym owners. It seems to be the
yeah,
case. So, you're
yeah,
not alone there.
especially small business owners
Yeah,
for sure. I've recently started saying that I think Andrew's really good at running a climbing gym, but he's not very good at making money, which are kind of two different problems, right?
totally. Totally.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that people look at it, right? So, people will invest heavily in, say, social media marketing or something like that. And I don't think that
Right.
that's a bad place to necessarily spend a lot of time and effort. But I also think that maybe that might be a little bit of a red herring for people sometimes. Because I think it does a really good job at engaging the people that are already here.
We talking about organic posts or are we talking about boosting or paid advertisement?
No, both, both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so specifically for organic posts, I think that does a pretty good job at engaging the people that are already here, but doesn't necessarily influence a buying decision or bring anybody specifically
Right.
in the door. As opposed to paid, um, in that kind of same vein, like I do think that it reminds people that climbing exists, but I don't think it necessarily gets people in the door either. I would say, with the specific exception that if you're advertising for a specific event, if you're throwing a big event, if you have a big comp, if you have a punch pass sale or something like that, then yes, absolutely. I think paid social posts is a really powerful tool there. But for general, like, hey, have you ever considered climbing as a sport before? I'm not convinced that that's necessarily the best return on investment. It is
Yeah.
cheap
Right.
start, and then it gets really expensive because then every time you open up the little Google Ads dashboard, it says, "Hey, did you know that businesses your size spend $150 a month?" And then if you spend that much, then they'll say, "Hey, did you know businesses your
Yeah, right.
size spend $250 a month?" So, um, funnily enough, in my previous career in software, I worked in ad attribution for
Mm.
a couple of years where I worked on the platforms that people would do ad analytics across all of this. So I'm very biased where I don't really love the pay to play ecosystem that current digital advertising sits in. So I have chosen to not spend as much time and effort into it, for better or for worse. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
many other people that would say that it's a really effective and powerful tool for them, but I haven't found that to be the case for us.
Do you use other methods then? Do you have like other forms of outreach that you're doing?
Yeah, I think something that people really sleep on actually is just the power of their internal newsletter. I think their internal
Mm.
newsletter is a lot more powerful and deserves a lot more attention than people really give it. Not just for a marketing tool to get people informed on what's on your calendar, as important as that may be. Um, I think that the internal newsletter really helps your membership base become more engaged about the relationship that they have with the business. So you've heard me say a lot of relational words and talk a
Yeah.
lot about the space that we exist within the community. A lot of my goal with our marketing channels is to help our customers feel like they are not just having a transactional experience with
Yeah.
Uplift, but they're actually having a relational experience with Uplift instead. Because when they think of the climbing gym, I don't want them to think of, oh, this is the place where I work out. I want them to think of Uplift as Andrew and Josh and Ellie
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
Elena and Lillian. I want them to really think of those interpersonal relationships, because that leads to where I'm going with it is, um, a much more powerful way to turn your members into your advocates for your
Yeah.
business.
Got
It's
it.
way more sticky and way more powerful for a member to bring in a new customer to try out the sport
Mhm.
because they're so stoked about the sport and this specific gym than it is for someone to see an ad, a print ad, a social media ad, and say, "Hey, maybe I should try this sport out for the first time."
Yeah. I love that. So, how do you, along those lines, how do you encourage your current members to refer new people?
For sure. Yeah. And again, also the longer, harder
Yeah.
path. I do think that this
Yeah.
builds more fruit in the future, but is more challenging in the short term. One thing that a lot of the traditional fitness industry does is a first time free entry into a gym. And we pretty regularly get people that come in and say, "Hey, how come you don't have something like this? LA Fitness has
Mm.
this, or 24-hour Fitness has that. I think that's kind of dumb that you guys don't have that." And we don't necessarily need to debate why the climbing industry doesn't like to do that. But one thing that we do is we allow members to bring in free first time guest passes. But importantly, this is separate than their regular guest passes. So a
Okay.
member gets 2 guest passes a month on their membership that they can use with no restrictions whatsoever. So there's none of this 30-day waiting period or anything like that. So if I have a friend that climbs at Vertical World but lives across town, so they'd never be a member at Uplift anyway, they can bring in Bob twice a month with their guest pass, so they can be friends and climb together, which I think is
Yeah.
just good for climbing as a sport. However, every visit my member is also able to bring in up to 2 free first time entries. So they sign their waiver on site. They've
Like
never
that.
been to the facility before type of people. So in theory, they could bring in, you know, 365 times two, 700 new people every year when they come to the gym. And people have asked me before, hey, Andrew, that seems really aggressive. Like, aren't you worried about all the lost revenue that you're getting from that? And I'm sitting here saying that was revenue that I was never going to get in the first place because these are people that are coming in that were never going to try the sport, right? These were
Yeah.
people that had very little interest in saying that climbing was actually for them. But I know that Sabrina said, hey, I really love this. And I think that you will love this too. This is an important part of my life and I want to share it with you. And that's
Mhm.
so much more of a compelling message than I can ever give them.
Yeah. And it's nice because you have a built-in guide.
Mhm.
I think
100%.
that's the part that stands out to me as being really smart is that we can debate whether someone's first visit should be free or not, but if someone just
Mhm.
walks in and doesn't have anyone to show them around and really
Right.
like get them excited about the sport, you
Right.
can be throwing away money.
Totally.
Whereas I think with your method, it's like, well, now this person is a member. They know how this gym operates. They're
Mhm.
excited. They're going to want to convert people if they really like it. And so
Totally.
I love it. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think the lesson that I kind of had to learn in when we chose to make that decision was that I need to stop being afraid of losing revenue that I was never going to get anyway. I think that's a really important distinction because as small business owners where every dollar matters, we really hold on tight and we're like, but I'm going to lose it if I give them this discount or if I do this or that or if I do a sliding scale membership. Like that's revenue that was never going to get actualized into your business. And I think the additional relationship that we build with those people pays those dividends because Sabrina is going to climb with us forever, right? And she's going to bring all her friends and she's going to have a great time. I will say on top of that, there are like important techniques that we do to fast follow up with those free first time guest pass users, right? We use different tools so that they check in on that guest pass. The day after, we send them an email that specifically says, hey, isn't it so great that you had a friend that brought you here? And then provide some incentive or offer for them to sign up.
Cool. Okay. I like that follow up too. I also noticed that you had on your website a sort of like a intro bouldering class that
Mhm.
included a 1 week trial membership. I've never seen that before. That seems like a
Okay.
great idea.
For sure. So that wasn't my idea. That was Brett Johnston at Vertical World's idea.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so they do
Cool.
something similar at their place as well. That's interesting to me that you said that you've never seen that before,
I've not.
because I have seen it in Seattle, but I used to be a member at
Oh,
Vertical
okay.
World and still love those guys, have a very close relationship with them. Yeah,
Okay.
so you do a bouldering basics class is what we call it, and then on the day of starting the day of your class, you also get a free week of membership on top of that, with the free rentals included for that entire week period. And the idea behind that was it's already a big step to get someone to come into the door to have that first intro to bouldering to class. And then they might think that they like it. They're not really sure. And then the very next time that they come in, you're going to charge them an additional $30 to convince them whether or not they like that sport.
Yeah.
And that does work for some people because if they've already committed and they've already decided, they will, um, they're going to come in and buy the additional day pass or buy the additional membership. But this feature was an attempt to address the people that weren't sure that they really wanted to do this and they wanted some confirmation that climbing was actually the sport for them. So they'll come in maybe one more time, maybe two, maybe three if they're really stoked, especially the mom with the middle school kid that is just bouncing off the walls and comes in a couple times and mom's like, "Man, I really don't want to drag you down to the gym again, but it doesn't cost me anything." And by the third time, mom says, "Oh, they actually do love this. I will sign them up for a membership. I will buy them a pair of shoes." And then the total cost to me as an owner is $60 in lost revenue or something like
Right.
that. And that cost of acquisition is totally worth it.
Do you have an idea roughly of what percentage of people take that class and then become members?
Yeah, I don't have a good convert a good percentage off the top of my head with that. It's less than we want it to be, and there's different ways that we're trying to incentivize that. So we've started implementing some tools with like A/B testing around if we follow up with this email instead of following up with that email, does that influence their buying decision at all? I will say that anecdotally, my experience has been that the people that do convert off of the basics memberships end up sticking around for quite a while, but getting that initial conversion is challenging.
Great. It sounds like you like have a really big community focus there,
Mhm.
and it sounds like you really care about the members and you care about connecting with them. And I assume that that has a really positive impact on retention. Would you say that you see pretty good retention with your members month over month?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that we do okay,
Yeah,
but I also don't have a strong understanding into how the rest of the market performs, right? I think that's what everybody wants to figure out is, am I doing better than the rest of the market is right now? But I also don't know that I actually care how the rest of the market is doing. I actually only
sure.
care about how I'm doing. Um,
Hmm.
so if that's the case, then I always want that to be better, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think there's room for improvement for that retention of members in order to get them to stick around for longer. So when people do cancel, and people cancel for all sorts of totally legitimate reasons, right? Like I moved, I lost my
Yeah.
job, I don't have as much time, I have other interests right now. And every time someone quits the gym, I'm like, ah, well, what could we have done to really keep their business? But I do feel like the people that do stick around and really become the true fans of Uplift, I've really seen them go the length in what it means to support this business in ways that I think are really beautiful. So I've been really
Awesome.
encouraged by that.
Awesome. So, what's the big dream for the gym? Where do you hope to be in 3 to 5 years?
That's a really good question. One of the things that I talk about a lot as well is that I really believe in a health over growth model. So, what I mean by that is that I want to emphasize the health of my business and the health of my community over the growth of my business. Um,
Hmm.
and also with the understanding that healthy things grow.
Yeah.
Um, so, if I'm able to emphasize the quality of the staff and the quality of the product and the quality of the community and the membership base, I do believe that leads to natural growth. So because of that, I don't have specific financial or facility goals. I'm not sitting here saying, hey, I want to open another facility by the end of 2030 or something like that.
Mm.
That's not really something that I have a lot of interest in at the moment. But instead, what I'm really focused on is making sure that we're still here
Yeah.
in a increasingly tough economic environment, and also making sure that we stay true to who we are and we stay true to who the business is, and that we're still serving our community in the best ways possible. Um, with all of that high and lofty language out of the way, I do think that there are other more discrete goals that we'd like to accomplish at Uplift as well. Like many other owners, we are a leased facility. So, and we do lease a freestanding building. We'd really love to have the option to purchase our building within the next 3 to 5 years so that we can control our space for forever. I really do think that should be a primary goal for pretty much every operator out there, if
Yeah.
that's an option, because that allows us to secure our future, right? Because when you're
Yeah.
in a leased space, there's always the question of like, well, I might have a friendly landlord now, but what if the landlord decides to sell to another business and they decide to tear this whole thing down and I can't really
Yeah.
move my business? Like if I had a restaurant, I could move it. In theory, I could move my climbing walls, but that's not
Yeah.
really
Brutal. Yeah.
practical, right?
So, if you could give one piece of advice to gym owners in their first couple of years of operating, what would it be?
Yeah, if I may give two, but they're
You
kind of
may.
related to each other. I think the advice that I would give to new operators is to first not be afraid. It's hard. The work that we're doing is really, really hard. And I think small business in many ways is uniquely challenging, that we don't really experience in other spaces. A lot of us in the climbing industry are first time small business owners that we've never done this before. So things are going to feel really terrifying, and there's going to be a lot of unknown and a lot of things swimming around, but it's good work. And if you decide and you really commit yourself to it, even if it doesn't work out, I think that there's a lot of good work to be had and a lot of fruit that will come out that's not necessarily financial that you always see. I tell people pretty regularly that Uplift is a wild success in every way except financial, and we're still trying to figure that part out. But if we lean into all the other good things that will really keep you going, um, and tied onto that, the other piece of advice that I have is to really celebrate and appreciate how far you've come, because maybe you've only been open 2 years, but a lot of people don't even get to the starting line. I can't tell you the number of time that
Yeah.
people have called me and said, "Hey, I really want to open a climbing gym. Can I ask you for advice? Will you even consult with me about XYZ?" We have 2 or 3 meetings and I just never hear from them again. Um, because it fizzled out and they either decide they didn't want to do it or decided it didn't make sense, or to be blunt, maybe didn't really have what it takes to push through and have the skills or situations necessary to make it happen. So being here at all is already a huge accomplishment.
That's great advice. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to meet. I mean, it's been an awesome conversation with you. I think that a lot of gym owners will get a lot out of this conversation. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
So where can people follow you and learn more about the gym?
Yeah, upliftclimbing.com, or if you follow uplift_climbing on Instagram, we have a Substack where I have only written 2 things on it, but I've been trying to write a little bit more on it as well to talk about more of this. We really want to be an advocate, just not for just the gym, but also for the sport as a whole. So yeah, that's where you can find us.
Great. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for sharing. Hopefully, everything goes well and you accomplish all of your goals in the next few years, and we can chat again when that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.